So good to see you all today. Thank you for joining me. We are going to be going over the first attribute on the rubric today, looking at some examples and just kind of talking through it, and also looking at the difference between STEM and STEAM for attribute 1, which is infrastructure. So for those that don't know me, my name is Misty Brown. I'm a STEM relationship manager with TSIN. Before actually joining TSIN, I was a classroom teacher and led my school through designation. So I've seen the rubric from both sides and worked with it from both sides, from the original to getting this one updated. So it is now the STEM and STEAM designation rubric. I do run the communications for TSIN, so you can find me on Twitter, and at the very end, I've got my email address so that you can take that down if you have any questions. And I will also be posting the presentation up on the website as a resource as well. So that we'll have the videos, we'll also have just the presentation. So in looking at this, I want to just kind of highlight what stands out in each rubric from what you may consider a more traditional school to a STEM or a STEAM school. And so I've done some little highlighting, a little bit of the colors, just to make those items pop out that we can really make sure we discuss those as compared to what you may be used to in a more traditional environment. So with infrastructure, we are looking at having that STEM or STEAM action plan. If that is something that your school hasn't created yet, we're going to go over that with attribute 1. That is going to be the foundational piece for infrastructure. This is one of those documents that you can go back to every single year and reevaluate where you stand, especially if you're going to be going through redesignation. Having that development from year 1 to year 5 with the redesignation, you can really track and see where you're growing, where your strengths are, where you may want to refine. And it helps you to pinpoint certain aspects of the rubric and of your facility and your infrastructure that you want to work on. So the leadership team is going to be collaborating frequently about the program's design and effectiveness. Through the infrastructure attribute, you are not only going to be looking at your leadership team, but how they're interacting with the staff and how the staff is interacting back. So it's an important reciprocal element to this portion of the rubric. Teachers are highly collaborative and community members are included in decision making, and that's pretty atypical from the traditional environment I have been in. As just a teacher, I was handed decisions. This is the way that things will be. When we became STEM designated and I was really involved in that environment, I had a voice, even as just a classroom teacher, and giving everyone that autonomy and that voice is a tremendous part of building that culture of STEM. Community members as well, because community partners are integral. We know that using them as leverage for projects, for planning, for using their STEM expertise, we need to have them in that decision-making process as well. And this is going to be how you include all of those voices within the decision-making processes. So we're going to go through each of the 5 steps for infrastructure. So 1 is probably going to be the fastest and the simplest for us to go through. So you have to have a strategic plan, and this is a plan that is grounded in research, and it's going to be leading you to the rest of the rubric, to the rest of the attributes. We don't make you create that on your own though. There is on the website an actual template that you just fill out and submit. You can do this with bullet points. Some people like to write their narrative in there as well. If you have an action plan for your school year, if you have a school improvement plan, you're going to be doing a lot of cut and paste because these things are very similar. So you may have this in some form, but you just want to look at it through a STEAM lens or a STEM lens. And what I'll do as well is point you to on the website exactly where you can download this. So it is under our STEM designation, but then you go to the very last, the downloads and resources, and it's going to be one of the first things there. But I'll point you to that in a moment. So the key thing when we're looking at the rubric, and I've got all of these broken down, remember that to be considered a STEAM or STEM designated school, you do have to score 90% in model. Okay, it doesn't have to all be model, but it can only be accomplishing or model. If you are in the earlier developing, that is not going to be designation eligible, but we would look at a 2-year process. So the keys here is if you have some type of organizational idea, some type of plan, but it's basic, or your STEM action plan is not fulfilled, you're going to hit in that early. If you've created it and it's detailed, but maybe you haven't really implemented that plan yet, you're going to hit in the developing. The key between accomplishing and model is everything that's in yellow. So accomplishing means you've implemented your plan, but model is that you've implemented it and you have partnerships. Those partnerships are post-secondary, they are community partners or businesses, and they're the ones that are also coming in to help identify what are real world STEM or STEAM problems that they're facing. And students are working on those and they're interacting in a real world scenario. One of the key things about the action plan, and we know that counties across the state like to shuffle administrators. And we have seen where schools become designated and a district says, wow, that school's succeeding. We have this school over here that's not succeeding as well. So we're going to take that leadership team and bump them on over. Suddenly, a new administrator comes in and they've inherited a STEM school. What do you do now? Well, one of the things with the action plan is that it should have the language in there that makes it sustainable, that makes the plans and the improvements sustainable, even if leadership changes. So that's one thing that a new leader coming in can always go back to, is that action plan and get a full grounded view of how the school operates as a STEAM or a STEM school. And the reason that I also like to encourage schools to go back to that yearly is, again, administration changing. Maybe it's not your lead administrator, but maybe your secondary, your assistant principals are coming in and changing, or your counselors. In order to get anybody on board with what's happening in a STEAM or STEM school, that action plan is going to be the foundation of having them understand the differences in the traditional world and that STEM and STEAM mindset. So I put a bunch of things in here for what could go as evidence for 1.1. Honestly, if you are including a fulfilled action plan, if it thoroughly talks about what to do with partners and leadership and sustainability, if leadership were to change, you're fine. These are all just writing out what that action plan does. Include the action plan as your evidence, and you're good. All right, so questions about 1.1. And I can see you all, and I've got the chat open, so you can feel free to flag me down, put it in the chat.
Hey, Mitzi.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to the actual action sustainability plan guide, the one that you guys, yes, thank you. I noticed right there at the very top in that bottom sentence that says under the essential questions, where is the readiness and needs assessment? I've tried to find that.
That would also be under our resources. I will plug in all the links to that.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And there was a PDF up. I have converted that. It's a Word document now. So when you do go to download the action plan, it's going to be a Word document that you can edit and you don't have to fight with a PDF.
Are the state, oh, I'm
Hi.
sorry.
Go. Okay, hi, Misty. This is Leslie from Arlington Middle School, and I was going to
Hello.
ask you about the sustainability plan. You said we could bullet point the things in the model, but we do not have to have an additional narrative. Is that correct?
You have the option. The narrative is
Okay.
there as an option if you want to explain any part, but you
Okay.
can just fill out the bulleted list.
All right, and some of the narratives in the other components of section of the infrastructure, we've noticed that some places it says 350 words and some say 250 words. Can you tell us which one of those would be accurate?
So they may be different on the different ones, but what I can do is go in and make them uniform.
Okay, is it a minimum or a maximum?
They have maximums.
So that is the maximum. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what, yeah. So we will make sure we were in line with that instruction.
Yeah,
All
what
right,
I can
that's
do
all
is
I
I can go through and I can make all of those one same maximum number. And that
All
should
right, thank
clear it
you.
up. Absolutely.
I have another question. So on the sustainability plan, if I wanted to show a long-term goals, so I know that it's easy for us to show what we are doing, correct? That's always the easy part. How can we, or maybe it's a better way to say this, can you give us an example of long-term STEM goals? You know, because we know what we're doing now and what we want to continue to do. Maybe a good example of what a long-term goal would be that I can wrap my head around that.
What you may be looking for is adding specific community partners where you could have certain PBLs where you're working with them that might integrate students going into externships or student experiences with like field trips and that kind of thing. So if you have a long-term goal of like working with someone and having a particular project come to fruition, that might be something. I know some places have said having mobile STEM labs or STEAM labs that can travel as they need to give more access. One school actually renovated their space. So they have a lab set up that was very static, and their long-term goal was to make it change 4 times a year as their PBLs for their school changed. And so depending on what stage you're at, those could be some long-term goals that you could work with. And sometimes it's also just integration within the core curriculum, seeing more core curriculum working together, putting their input into STEM projects and having those STEM projects connect back with the courses you might not necessarily think of, but do really have a home for STEM. Maureen, did you have a question?
There you go. Got it. Yes, I was asking the little small numbers on the sustainability plan. Are they in reference to the like subgroups?
So there's an additional form. It's a needs and assessment form, and I'm going to link that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Of course. And if I'm going quickly and you have a thought and you don't want to lose it, feel free to put it in the chat, and as soon as I end a section, I'll come back to it. I'm one of those, if I don't type it down or write it down, I'm going to forget what I wanted to ask. So moving into the leadership team. So this is 1.2. 1.2, every school's got a leadership team. Every school is going to have those people that convene and try to make plans and decisions. One of the differences that really happens in your STEM and STEAM schools is going to not necessarily be that first part talking about we're going to make a plan and assess its effectiveness. It's that bottom part. School leaders provide an opportunity for staff members to exhibit responsibility and commitment to the success of the school. Staff contributes to and has a say in the decisions regarding the school, and the staff collaborates, for continued improvement. That's the difference. Think about when you're looking at 1.2, how are you going to articulate that staff has buy-in, that they have a sense of ownership of the school and the school's success. How do they give input? How do they receive feedback? Do they feel like they have a voice in that? One of the ideas here that I love is the exhibit responsibility. I have worked on some staffs where teachers didn't feel trusted to be autonomous. They didn't feel like they were trusted to make the decisions that were right for their students. And telling them instead, you were hired to do a job. You know what that job is? Impress me. And letting them have that responsibility and autonomy. That's sort of what this does. So if you have a school leadership team and a STEM leadership team, you do want to showcase that STEM leadership, but then talk about what voice the STEM leadership has within the school team. Is there, several members? Are they, with them overlapping, are they the voice of that STEM leadership team? Are they coming in there as the representatives to make sure that that STEM does have a large presence within the school? So you want to focus on the STEM leadership and how they come to decisions, how they create a plan, but then how does that then get incorporated and interpreted at the school leadership level? Where I was at a fully STEM school, and so we were a staff of 40-ish, serving 600 kids, and so we had one leadership team and it just did all the things. When we look at the leadership team, I don't believe that anyone here is going to be falling under early, where you just have no evidence that you have a leadership team functioning. So we can sweep that one to the side. So with developing, you're in those beginning stages. You've got your team and you're starting to work on that plan. You're starting to implement that plan. And that, again, is the action plan where it's going to come back in to guide you. Accomplishing, here's where you get the difference between accomplishing and model. Select staff is engaged in planning versus all staff is engaged in planning. That voice, that ability to have input, feedback, and it be reciprocal for all staff, it doesn't mean that they're all sitting in on every leadership team, but it means that they do have the opportunity to speak out, to give input on the status of the school, to make suggestions, and to have that voice then heard and responded to. This is my favorite. So STEM is not a product. It's a culture. And it's a mindset. It's a process, but it's not going to be a product that you can box up, and it's going to look different in every single school. So when I show you examples that have been taken, remember that you're going to end up making them your own. So for your evidence of your leadership team, you want to include those stakeholder voices. You want to talk about who was there, what were they saying, how are they involved? Things that you might be submitting are your leadership rosters, your meeting agendas, and again, articulating how that staff is part of the decision-making process. So what I've done, and as you look at the examples, you'll notice I've redacted names and I've taken out any school information because these are examples from an actual school. They applied last year and they were able to receive designation. So here we have just a general leadership team agenda. Down where the X's are and it's been blacked out, that was everybody in attendance. And then they were able to go through and mark off anything that they needed to as they went through their meeting. I love that they also have their norms on there, just as a general reminder. We have a growth mindset. We disseminate information. We're respectful of our time. Those professional norms that we're all used to, and sometimes we just kind of forget. They put them on the template, and every single meeting note, meeting agenda had those on there. Beneath what you actually have is where it says celebrations, reviews, all of that. There's a section under this page that just details, outlines what they're going to go over. It's not a paragraph, but it is just a general outline. So this is one way you might document. Another thing that I used to do, and that I've seen other schools do, is have a live Google Doc. Every single new meeting just gets tacked onto the bottom. Over to the side, you have an outline that just goes by the date. So you click on it and suddenly you go down to that meeting and that day. You can add to that for years. You could have, or archive it every single year that you have your PLC, your meeting notes, your goals and aspirations. You can just have those running. So, questions about 1.2? All right.
Well, I think I do.
Okay.
Okay. If we're going to show feedback, so when because we do this all the time, we have great leadership meetings once a month, and we, we give an opportunity for the faculty or for the leadership to actually come speak on behalf of their team, basically concerns, things like that, celebrations, obviously, and then the concerns, and we kind of discuss those and we come up with solutions. I'm assuming, but I don't like that word, that's probably a good way to show that feedback of where we're coming up with solutions. We're having that feedback should all be just that documentation in that agenda, correct? I mean, there's not, okay.
Yeah, as long as it's in that agenda. Here's where we have science coming in and our celebrations and concerns with science. Here's a situation they're looking at, and here's where we're putting something in place. Next meeting, you may say, hey, how did that go? When you went back and talked with science and disseminated that information, how did that problem resolve? And then you've come full circle. That's the other thing I really love about that rolling document, is you just scroll back to the last meeting, and that way you can hit every last concern. All right, leadership professional development, not to be confused with attribute 3 of just professional development. So 1.3 is just how the leadership team is developing on its own outside of the staff. So the key here is in developing strategies to promote staff effectiveness and improve teaching and learning environments. So this is how the leadership team is coming back to prepare the leaders within the school on being effective, on best practices, and how to have those policies that promote success. Now, on this one, again, I really don't see anybody hitting that early stage where we rarely participate in professional development. I think we all know that professional development is everywhere, and we're all participating in it all the time. When we look at developing, here's where we start to quantify how much professional development we're looking to get. Semi-annually, so we're hitting it once, twice a year. We're not really delving that deep. When we go up to accomplishing, we are looking at annual and semi-annual. So now we're starting to move into a more frequent pattern of professional development, and model is going to be quarterly. So you have a professional development for the leadership team once a quarter, and that allows them to not only have just professional development, but also network with other school leaders. And if you need contacts for a school that is around you, If you want to connect with a STEM school that is, you know, closer to your region, or there's one that you really are interested in, I am happy to get you in contact with anyone at a STEM school. I've got a whole list of contacts, and I can set up an email and provide an introduction anytime that you need. So this is going to be professional development that is both leadership focused, but also content focused, especially as you're trying to integrate contents. You may have this from the state, your district. It may come from us. TSIN has lots of different options for professional development. Higher ed, if you're not using your hub, they have professional development. They'll come out and lead for you. It can be job embedded. It can come from going and visiting another STEM or STEAM school and having that contact of walking the halls, talking to the kids, talking to the teachers, just getting a feel for what it's like. It could also be research-based or peer-to-peer. This is not going to be a one-size-fits-all. The professional development is going to have to address the needs of your school, the needs of your staff, and the needs of your students. So there's lots of different options out there. The key is just documenting it. So the easy way to do that is, again, keep a running list. Where did you go? What did you see? And when was it? And then who was there? And this could be a list that you update yearly, or you ask people to go in quarterly and put in what they've been working on. You can do this for the leadership team for that professional development. Then you can have a separate one that looks just like this and tell your staff, every time you go do a professional development, just type up what it was. And then when it comes to that data collection, you've got it right there. Any questions about 1.3? One 1.4 is one of my favorite ones to actually review because it shows what STEM looks like in your school. It's going to be how you've either, and it does not have to be designed for STEM. It can be adapted for STEM. So the school that I was at, we couldn't actually change our buildings because they were historic. And so we had to adapt a lot in order to make things work. And that's perfectly fine. You don't have to have a, one dedicated space where everything is the most advanced new thing rolling off the line. There's lots of ways to implement STEM without doing all of that. Spaces are made available for collaboration. That can be library space, cafeteria space, special lab space or workspace, a particular nook where kids can go and work on projects. The other thing is that the resources are made available to students in order to explore, in order to implement STEM. If everything's kept under lock and key and no one can get into it except for their one little STEM time, how are they really creating? And if they're only allowed that STEM time when it's STEM class and not through the rest of the time, how are we integrating? So it's easy to make a classroom collaborative, take the desks and turn them toward each other, right? Oh, wait, we're in a pandemic. So if you are under restrictions about keeping kids separated, doing social distancing and that kind of thing, if there's a time where they get to sit around a table, or if you adjust the desks at certain points, just make notes of that in your narrative. We understand as the review team, we're all being forced to make some difficult choices and changes in order to keep everyone as safe as possible. And where you may have had everybody sitting around a table and packed them in like sardines, now you've got, you know, 4 feet in between everyone, and you've only got 3 kids at the table. Just write up in the narrative, you know, we're doing what we can and to keep everyone safe, and this is how we are managing collaboration. Instead of collaborating in the classroom now, because we can social distance better and be in larger groups, we go outside. Things like that. Again, the big key between going from accomplishing and model is the use of additional space for kids to work and collaborate. One of the things that we actually ended up doing that worked well for us was using our cafeteria space when it wasn't a cafeteria, in order to give kids the extra space to work together and spread out. Things like cafeterias, gyms, that kind of thing, if they're not in use, they can be really, really helpful to give you that large area and let the kids work together, but also keep their social distancing. One of the big keys too is between going from developing all the way up to model is the culture of inquiry. How does that school show a culture of inquiry? How are you encouraging kids to question, to have that growth mindset, to be able to see that sometimes there are no limits. Sometimes it's your creativity that's going to come to that final solution. So you can look where the classrooms are designed, movable tables, movable desks, spaces for project work, big whiteboards, lots of chart paper that can draw things out on, facilities that have either the technology or at least journals or posters that talk about the processes. When you come to actually documenting all of this creative critical thinking, you can do photos, you can do video, you can have school maps, you can do a tour. And the great thing with all of those is if you're going to be adding up photos and videos and tours and that kind of thing, put it on your website. If you're going to create a collection of how STEM works in your school, use it to promote what your school is doing. I don't believe that you should have to do anything and just let it fall to the wayside. I believe in using it every way you possibly can. Example, here we have a mobile STEM lab where it could travel from room to room. And then we have our actual STEM lab in a school where they are physically creating with the products that they have. And not a lot of technology here as far as, you know, they're not using a computer or anything like that. This is physical hands-on STEM, and that counts. So it doesn't have to be all 3D printers and one-to-one devices. It's sometimes egg cartons and popsicle sticks. Any questions on 1.4? Okay, last one of infrastructure is your school schedule. The key in what you submit to us is how we're able to see the ample time the teachers have to collaborate, that they're allowed to do projects, that we're doing co-teaching and integration of subjects. One of the things that we would have done previously was block off 2 courses that ended up working together to teach their curriculum. So it was an English course and a social studies course. And the English course used the text that social studies needed to study in order to analyze it. So they were able to block up 2 classes worth and teach together. It was really cool. So early teachers have a common plan time within the school day. That's pretty standard. But by the time we get into developing and we start looking at accomplishing, we are looking not just at that common plan time, but we're looking at integrating 2 or more subjects that may not be working together. So if you have math and English, and you say, well, there's no way they're going to work together, but they could, because ultimately word problems are just a combination of those. So there was one particular unit where I taught about the Canterbury Tales. And I got to talking with an instructor in math, and she said, oh, do you know how they found out that 1/3 of England died during the bubonic plague? And I was like, no. And she goes, oh, it's logistics population modeling. And she taught me how it works. And so she started teaching stuff about medieval England in her math course, and I started teaching stuff about logistics population modeling in my English course. And it was really amazing. And kids that were usually dozing off for English were so excited to be doing math and English instead. It was a really cool experience. So showing on your schedule the consistent way that teachers are able to collaborate or co-teach, also allowing that additional time for planning and projects. So if you have an early release day, if you have certain PD time scheduled in, how can you change that or manipulate that in a way that allows teachers not only of one discipline or one grade level, but across the board to work together. Now, as for what you're going to be submitting, honestly, it's going to be a master schedule. Show us mainly the highlighted areas, where are the common plan times, and how do we know who's meeting. Now, I have seen some master schedules that were mind-blowing and mind-melting. So that's where I do say, you know, highlighting in one color, here's where these teachers meet, here's where these teachers meet. Because once you start to look at some of these examples, they can be a little overwhelming, especially in some larger schools. So here they've color-coded their courses and color-coded their, excuse me, not color-coded, but separated out their grade levels. And so, and then put in who meets when. So this was one of their pages out of several pages for their master schedule. So this year, you do have the option of going for STEAM designation instead of STEM designation only. So the key to having the difference between STEM or STEAM is going to be right here. How are you showing the thorough integration of the arts? Through the action plan, through the leadership team, through that PD, and through that multidisciplinary, there we go, PBL design. If you are showing the arts embedded into those, then it's going to qualify for that STEAM designation. All right, so I've got my email here at the very end. And of course, I'm going to post this presentation up as well. One of the questions that did come through was, if we are going for STEAM designation and we don't get STEAM designation, are we automatically submitted as a STEM designation? No. If you are going for STEAM designation and you do not hit that mark, it does not drop off and you drop down to STEM. It's considered that you just did not make designation for STEAM. So we don't know up until January 15th, when you hit the submit button, whether you have chosen STEM or STEAM. And so I recommend continually going back to that rubric and making sure that you have everything for the arts integrated. And if it doesn't feel fully integrated to you, you know your school, trust your gut, and you can mark STEM. That doesn't mean that the next time for redesignation that you have to go as a STEM designation. Redesignation, you can go for STEAM. But it does not just drop down, because STEM is not a step below STEAM. It's its own category. One of the other questions that came up was, how far back are we looking for evidence? Definitely this school year. But there's only so much of this school year you can show us, because January you submit, you've got half of a year left that we won't get to see. So you can definitely pull from last year and this year. If you have a particular example, maybe you continually run a PBL and you want to show what it looked like before these times pandemic, as my friend says. If you want to include something that says, here's what it originally looked like and here's how we've adapted over the last 2 years, you can include that, but the artifacts we do want to see are mainly from these last 2 years. And remember that we understand you all are adapting on the fly, you're modifying, you're literally pulling out all the stops to make this happen for your kids. So we're not going to be saying, well, you could have, had them collaborate in small groups. Well, no, we know that you're not allowed to do that sometimes. So I will open up the floor for questions. And of course, if questions pop into your head as you go through the rest of the week, shoot me an email. I am always available via email. One thing I will do before I let you go is I will show you the website and take you where you need to go in order to find your resources. There we go. So over the next 2 months, we are looking at revamping the website. So you may see some things changing. If you ever can't find anything, let me know. I've possibly shuffled it as we try to clean things up and redesign some stuff. So when you go to STEM designation and the side menu pops down, designation resources and downloads are going to have your documents. So you have the rubric that you can download, general application, and a partnership agreement form you can use with your community partners. And here's where you find your sustainability plan, and downloading that will download the Word version of it. You also have a PBL template you can use if you have not been implementing any PBLs, and our evaluation crosswalk that talks about the team administrator and team education evaluation rubrics. We do have a recorded presentation from the summit last year with Becky Ash, where she does talk about designation. So if you have anyone in the district or your school that needs just some general information about why we do what we do and why we feel that this designation is important, that recorded presentation can explain quite a bit. And then we have the presentation as well that she used. And we'll soon have a tab that has this recording and this presentation as well. Well, if no one has questions, I am happy to let you regain a few minutes of your day, respect your time, because I know you are all tremendously busy. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you hit any questions or just need clarification. And I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday for the big, very big presentation of Attribute 2, Curriculum and Instruction. The readiness needs assessment. Yes, I will send that to everyone. We've moved it off of the web page, and so I will email that out to you. Well, I thank you all so much for your time. Have a wonderful week. Countdown is on till winter break. You can make it. I believe in you.